My name is Ginger Broderick, and I'm the host of Ginger New York. Welcome to Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and we're taping a show here today on West 59th Street Studios. Don't move. Don't leave the set. We have a very special guest today, and of all of you sports fans out there, you don't want to miss this upcoming show. We have New York Giants Super Bowl champion. He's a sideline reporter for WFAN, and you can see him on a lot of different radio and TV shows. His name is, do you know? Howard Cross. Hey, Howard, thank you very much for joining us here at Ginger New York.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Do you remember how we first met?
We were at Salute, hanging out, having a adult beverage, probably, enjoying some good food.
Yes. Well, I remember taking your chair, not knowing that it belonged to you, but I thought, whoa. When you came back, I was shaken. I was like, oh my God, I took that football player's chair. But you were a good sport. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Salute's restaurant, because that is where I met Howard. He was very much a gentleman. He let me keep his chair. And they also provided the food for us today. They're official sponsor of Ginger New York, so I want to thank the managers, Mateo and Michael, and the help of Aaron for providing the food for the staff and the crew here today at the show. Great.
Good food.
Tell me, Howard, you're a sideline reporter now for the New York Giants. What is it like, you know, being on the sidelines with that team?
It's kind of cool. You think about it. You play there for about a number of years. You enjoy being around the guys. You enjoy being around the game. You know, I do commercial real estate. I'm in the public all the time working, and I hear all the time, great show this week. I hear, wow, what a great thing. I used to even conduct, you know, locker room interviews after the game. I'm like, it was just so stressful for me because I wanted them to win every game. And if they didn't win, I used to hate when reporters would ask me questions afterwards. But so, you know, it was an interesting little dynamic for me. It's great because you get to be on the game, you get a bird's eye view or a sideline view, like a coach of what's going on. It's great because I know almost all the players. So when they're coming off, sometimes it's hilarious. They try to run over and give me a high five. I'm like, don't put me on camera, just relax. It's cool to see and get, you know, you're still so close to the action and the excitement that you're really superly affected by when it's going on.
Do you want to run out and play in the game again?
No, not at all. Those days are gone. No, my kids maybe one day, but never. I'm done with that running thing. That's awesome.
And is it difficult to interview these players? I mean, I would think sometimes you'd have to criticize them on some of the plays or the decisions that they make. Is that difficult for you to do as a reporter, especially since you probably have good relationships with them? No,
not really, because, you know, I'm always doing it from a very true, honest perspective. I'm always doing it from a perspective like, you know, I actually played, I understand the game. Not only do I understand the game, I kind of understand what you should be doing, so I could coach. It's easier for a guy when he hears me say, hey, look, you really need to do X. And they're like, I'm like, well, you know, or you can just do it the way you're doing it and keep messing it up. And they respect it, they understand it. And again, I'm malicious with it. I basically work with them the entire time. I talk to them about it. I even tell guys when they're doing interviews if they're not doing a good job of interviewing. And then, so if you ask a question and they're very put off, or you'll see a lot more players today going into the media. And you know, the NFL has a media boot camp. The NBA has a boot camp. So they send these guys into the media, so they have to learn to not just talk to the media, but really be a part of it.
I would say even on the college level, they would have to do that too. Or is that more of the star players?
It's more the NFL. I think college still, you know, they're supposed to be student athletes, and if colleges have their way, they want to keep that facade working, that it's a student athlete, where it's really, these guys are stars and celebrities. And some schools, more than others, have a lot of, you know, mainstream guys that when you hear their name, you know, like Andrew Luck from Stanford this year, everyone knew who that kid was. He's going to, you know, replace Peyton Manning. RG3 down in Baylor, quarterback, won the Heisman. He's on TV every week. They've been kids brilliant, just like the kid from Stanford. So you get to hear these guys and see these guys all the time. Those guys are polished. It's the other guys that aren't, you know, that aren't the mainstream guys, the guys that are on the air every week.
And do you think that you get better interviews or more inside stuff because of your relationship with the players?
Well, you have to be very, not only fair, but you have to be very understanding. The guys will tell you things sometimes that you shouldn't repeat, or that it shouldn't be public, because in one instance I am the reporter, but in the other instance I do understand the whole fraternity of the game, and that when we're talking. It's not to be spread out. You don't have to go to me or say to me, hey, this is off the record. No, that doesn't really exist. We just...
So you are a filter for it.
Yeah, I know better.
And would you think that there's other correspondents, sportscasters, who would take advantage of that? Or
absolutely. There's tons of... Most thing that you want to do, or the biggest thing people want to do, and it's probably is my flaw, they want to make a mark for themselves. And sometimes it's asking a mean question. Sometimes it's never letting something go. Sometimes it's painting a picture of something that they feel is important. They want to make it bigger and better than it really is, or that it's not, and then that becomes a big issue. I guess a great example was a couple years ago, LeBron James he's leaving, I'm taking my talents to Miami. That was a Jim Gray moment. Jim Gray kind of created that moment. I want you to tell me and me alone. Every reporter was fiending, trying to figure out how to get that moment where they could figure out where he was going. But Jim Gray had rigged it where all the proceeds was going to LeBron's charity. And he had sponsors who were fighting and battling to be on the set, to be a part of it. So all of that made it look like LeBron was bigger than he was. He didn't handle it probably the way he should have, but that's a media-driven moment.
Was it an easy transition from you to go from a professional football player as a correspondent? Because I know from myself as a CPA, I had to do 100 interviews before I felt comfortable in front of the camera.
You know, I do a lot of things. I do a lot of motivational speaking. I do a lot of corporate speaking. I do auctions, and it's like a comedy skit, so it's kind of fun. And while I played, I believe I did an internship almost every year I was in the league, because I wanted to find something to do. In those days, we weren't making $10 million a year or $15 million a year, so we were making good money. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that we knew that your life after football, there had to be actually life after football, or life after your sport. And basically, I mean, if you made $200 million, you're 35, 36, what are you going to do?
Right.
So it was always, I needed to do something. I grew up working hard, so I wanted to make sure that I had something to do.
Do you find that a lot of people start to plan early for their after pro football career?
No.
No.
Not.
Because I think you're very successful. I mean, you're in real estate sales. And
it's more about the reason why you don't. You went to school to be an accountant. So when you were in high school, we won't go any further back, college, you start to lean towards accounting. You start to lean towards that's your profession. Then you leave college and you start to look for a job. You pass your exam. Now you're a public accountant. That's your job. That's kind of what you've kind of grown up to do. Same thing kind of happens in sports. Whether you're a football, basketball, tennis, whatever it is, you're studying the whole time, growing physically and mentally, trying to become a better player at the sport that you're in. Once you get to be at the pinnacle of that sport, whether you're quote unquote a professional, then you're, for no better terms, that's your livelihood, that's your job. So life after your profession that you studied for probably since the days when you were a child doesn't really count.
I want to talk a little bit about being a reporter for the Giants this year. During the year, they were about 7-7, and a lot of people kind of wrote them off. Did you write them off during that time, or did you know that they were going to get to the Super Bowl?
I wish I could sit here and tell you I knew they were going to get to the Super Bowl. I had wrote them off probably when they were like, after they had lost to Seattle. I'm like, there's no way this team's going to be good enough to make it even into the playoffs. I felt bad for Coach Coughlin. I had Coach Coughlin getting fired and Perry Field, the defensive coordinator. I'm like, this is going to be tough. I had even made a bet with a fellow broadcaster. I'm like, if they win more than 6 games, I'll give you $20.
Wow.
And when they got to 7, he goes, they won 7 games. I'm like, you know what? At the end of the season, I'll pay you. And we made a joke about it. And as the season went along, the thing that happened that that was discounted, that no one thought about, was they weren't healthy. And one coach came to me and said, we're staying in this race, and we're not healthy yet. Imagine what happens when we get healthy. And I thought, that is the worst excuse I've ever heard. Everybody's unhealthy. And of course, he was right. the moment O.C. GingerNewYork got back, the moment Bailey got back, the linebacker, the moment Tuck started to feel better, then all these holes in the system seemed to fill in. All three receivers were healthy. Everybody was healthy at the same time. The running backs were on the field. It's like, uh-oh, maybe he was right. So that's kind of where the team really made a big jump. When everyone got healthy, they were a good team to begin with. But once they all got healthy, they were a great team.
That's great. No, it's been very exciting to follow them. You were very nice to agree to an interview back in November, and but you said that it had to be after Super Bowl. So I just wondered if you knew at that time that they were going to go all the way.
I wish I knew at that time. That'd have been great. I mean, they're a good team. I mean, they got a great nucleus of players. They'll be okay.
Was there any special moment during the season that really stood out to you? Besides the Super Bowl, of course, but
well, there was some times when Bowley and those guys all got together. They started to play better at the end of the year. The Giants had lost to the Redskins, and everybody was like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "They're not done. They get to play the Jets. They can beat the Jets." And everybody's like, "Well, the Jets are good." I'm like, "They're going to beat the Jets." I'm like, I feel bad for the Jets because they're same town, a lot of hoopla. I'm like, they're just not going to make the playoffs. And then when they got ready to play Dallas, everybody's like, it's that moment. Can Tony Romo make it happen? And he just missed one play, and that was the difference in the Super Bowl.
Wow, that's really exciting. A lot of very exciting moments, for me to watch. I don't understand football. I was a cheerleader. I've watched the game so many times. What are they doing? And even when the Super Bowl was playing, and it was Ahmed that had the ball, and he was running towards the end, I was surprised he didn't even cross the finish line. But I guess the clock was supposed to run down, and he wasn't even supposed to do a touchdown, but he did it butt first. I mean,
well, it's one of those things.
I wish I was a photographer there on the field.
It's one of those things where you pick the lesser of two evils. If you stop them from scoring, and then the next play they score, your time's gone. So New England made a decision to let them run in, which is funny. They could have done it the play before, and they would have had even more time. But they decided on that play, just let them run in. And the Giants thought about it, but they didn't really verbalize it. When he handed the ball off and Eli turns around, he can see the players spreading, and the running back can see them spreading. But by the time he really recognizes what's really going on, he can't stop. And that's why he falls backwards into the end zone, because he's trying to tap himself down on the 1 inch line.
Yeah, that's great. Was there a special moment during that game that you really liked?
The game was a great game. I think probably the biggest moment for them was they kept finding a way to stop them in unique times. And I kept saying, like, it's going their way. People were like, well, what do you mean? There were fumbles that the Patriots should have got, they never got. There was one drop pass, another drop pass. I'm like, too many things are breaking the Giants' way. I said, it's going to be a close game, but the Giants should pull it out.
Yeah, that's really great. What do you think about Eli Manning? Do you think that he's an elite quarterbacker?
Let's see, Eli Manning and the word elite. That's Michael Kay from Yes, and Michael Kay from ESPN Radio. So he corners Eli and tries, this is when I say guys try to make you say something that gives them pub. Michael Kay got burned on this all year. He asked Eli, are you an elite quarterback, like your brother, like Brady, like some of the others? Eli goes like, well, yeah, I consider myself an elite quarterback. An elite quarterback. He was like, yeah, an elite. Was he supposed to say no? Or it's up to you to judge? Like, you never played football. How are you supposed to judge? Yeah. So once he says that, all of a sudden, that's the question and the conversation for the whole year. And then he answered it pretty well this year. He's definitely an elite quarterback. He had more second half yards and touchdowns. He had more fourth quarter comebacks and touchdowns than anybody maybe in history.
That's wild. That's wonderful. That's great. What about the head coach? Do you think he'll be a coach in the Hall of Fame?
Well, if it were me and I was Tom Coughlin, I would retire now.
Oh, interesting.
I would go out on the highest note possible. I'd leave, which would kind of ensure my Hall of Fame status.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because, if you go, you're usually only judged on what you did last. So if he goes out next year and they go 4-12 or 6-10, they're like, oh, he's lost a team. Every year they're trying to
okay.
fire him. They were even trying to fire him this year. I mean, the fans were, but he comes back and he wins the Super Bowl. I'd go out on top and walk away.
What about coaching for yourself?
Me? Oh, the thing with coaching is it's a huge commitment. Not the work isn't, and because my work is a huge commitment, but the thing that really you have to think about is like these guys don't go home at night. They spend nights on the couches in their offices watching tape. They're usually there like before all the players get there. When the players go home, they're still breaking down tape. They're 2 or 3 weeks in advance to every moment. So they have more, for no other words, they have more studying to do. They have to put it in a form, but when players look at it, they understand it. So they don't just wake up one day and there's a playbook. These guys create every moment. So they do all the research, all the study, and they have a couple guys that are around to help put it together once they give it to them, but they produce everything themselves. It's a very well-oiled situation. I have kids,
Right.
and coaches, they love their children. I don't want to make it sound like they don't, but they don't get a lot of time, I'm sorry, to spend with their children. And that's the one thing that, you really don't want that. You really want to have a chance to spend as much time as possible with your kids and watch them grow up. My mom and dad were there for me all the time. And I don't want to leave my kids on the assumption that, and like I said again, coaches love their children.
Right.
But for me, I like, I coach Pee Wee football, Pee Wee baseball, Pee Wee softball, basketball. I coach whatever they're doing. I try to help and coach, except for lacrosse. I don't know anything about that. But everything else, I get involved in.
That's wonderful. I went to St. John's University during the Chris Mullen era, and I sat in on his interview with at Center Stage with Michael Kay. And that was one of the questions they had asked, is, when you left being a pro player, why didn't you become a coach? And one of the things he mentioned is that he wanted to spend time with his family.
It's hard. It's a very hard. It's a huge balance. I give those guys a lot of credit for being able to do it. But, and the other thing is, if you're a coach, even if you're a head coach, you only have like a 4 or 5 year run, then you have to like pick up everything and move.
Right. And
it's not like you get to retire and that's it. I'm going to retire, I'm going to sell insurance. No, you usually continue to coach. So you may be in New York this year, or Cleveland next year.
Yeah.
You could be in Indianapolis the following year. You could be, the coach at Indianapolis was a coach there for like 10 years. Now he's not. He moves to Pittsburgh. So it's a really weird, these guys have the houses all over the country. It's just a really weird way to make money. I don't know if my wife and my family would have put up with it either.
Yeah, I went to see the Broadway show Lombardi, and so it talked about he grew up in New Jersey, he lived in New Jersey, and he was a teacher or a salesman, and he had this opportunity to move to the Midwest, where I'm originally from, and boy, those are cold winters out there. What's your opinion of Victor Cruz, wide receiver of the Giants?
Ooh, Victor Cruz, good question. I like Victor. I think he's a very humble, very smart young man. I think that when you're not given a lot of opportunities, and you get one and you make the most of it, I think you have a different perspective on what you're doing. I hope, and I do mean I hope, he stays as level-headed and on that point as possible. I think the Giants, as well as the NFL, have an incredible opportunity to capture the Latin American market if they like, in some way or form. He has really ignited a lot of people.
How has the game changed since you've been a player?
Whew, that's easy. When I played, football was almost dangerous. It was scary. We hit each other a lot harder. A lot of things that are illegal now were legal back then. If the ball was thrown and the quarterback overthrew you, a linebacker or a safety would hit you so hard.
I think they hit him hard now. I don't know how the body survived.
But it's different though. When the ball's over your head and there's no way for you to catch it, they would hit you to give you a warning. When it comes again, I'm going to hit you again, whether you have it or not. So the rule was, no matter what, catch the ball because they're going to hit you anyway.
Wow.
Now if the ball's thrown over your head, they can't hit you.
Okay.
Because they're considered a defenseless receiver. Quarterbacks, I can remember Phil Simms and Joe Montana and other guys getting crushed by D linemen. They were getting smashed and mauled into the ground. Now you can barely hit a quarterback. If you tackle him, if you sack him, you're really wrapping him up and taking him to the ground. Not the way we would play when they would lift the guy up and launch themselves into the ground with him. it's just a different game. They've made it safer. It's different where there was a 5-yard rule now that they can't touch a receiver after 5 yards. That makes it, that gives a receiver or anybody a chance to play football. When I played, they could maul you all the way down the field. So it took you years to learn how to run a route, how to separate from a guy, how to, you could be a 4.2 40 guy, but if they had their hands on you the whole time, you were running like 5.2 because you couldn't get away from it. Now, with the 5-yard rule, a guy, if he gets one step, he's gone.
What about the armor? I heard that it's about about 35 pounds. The armor's 35 pounds.
The pads and stuff, the pads are lighter now. The only thing that's really in question, and they're still trying to figure out, is the football helmet itself.
Okay.
And no one can explain how to make that safer, bigger, or whatever. They figure if they make it safer, guys will use it as a weapon more. And they figure if they make it softer, then the guys could be injured more. And with this whole concussion thing going on, it's a little bit of a stretch.
And you were a blocker, right, when you were playing football. What about, how would you feel about blocking some of the Giant players?
I played tight end, so I caught some passes, but I was definitely a blocker. And the big joke is, some of the guys like OC and Tuck and everything, they're like, could you block me? I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, you probably could. Like, blocking's more of an attitude and a want to. It's fun if you know what you're doing. There's a lot of leverage. Strahan, LT, myself, Charles Haley, Reggie White, Carl Banks, guys around the league, Kevin Green, whoever. It was a lot of fun to play against some of the greatest players in history and go against them in practice. So today's guys, good guys, but they're not in the same breath as these guys.
I was attending a lecture at Facebook headquarters up on Madison Avenue, not too far away from your office, and I saw a sign when I was there. What would you do if you didn't have fear? Does a football player have fear?
Absolutely. That's what drives them to play.
Really?
Absolutely. You have fear of hits. You have fear of, you see guys catch the ball and take a few steps and they go down. They're not going down. They're going down to protect themselves. They know that they can get hit. They have fear of failure, which is probably the greatest fear that players have. And they have fear that the guy that's behind them is going to take their position.
Behind them is going to take their position.
Meaning, like, if you're the starter, there's a young guy behind you.
Got it.
He's there for your job, so there's a fear that you can't ever give him a shot.
Got it. And how did you sustain your career for such a long time? In 13 years with the Giants, I don't think anybody else has surpassed that marker.
I enjoy. It's some
general.
guys. I enjoyed playing. That's what. When I said that when my time was up, I would just walk away, and they were always like, "Yeah, well, you don't get to walk away. We'll tell you." I'm like, "No, when I get tired, I'll stop." And there were other guys. They brought in tons of players to try to take my position and do all the stuff that they always say. And I just played because I had fun. And when I stopped having fun, I stopped.
Were your contracts, for 3 or 5 years or for 10 years? Or
No,
what made you stay with the Giants for so long as opposed to going to other teams?
Wow, that's a loaded question, unfortunately. I stay with the Giants because in my mind, and today I probably would never have done it, but back then in my mind, there was no need to move around. It was I'm a very settled person. I like being in New York and the New York market. I was making more money than my dad would have ever made in his entire life. And even though it's nothing compared to what everybody makes now, I'm like, what's the use of me going from one team to the next, trying to make money somewhere else, trying to reprove myself to another group of guys when I'm here, and regardless of which coaching staff comes in and leaves, they know, like, okay, this is the guy.
Is there any favorite player that you have on the team right now?
Right now on the Giants team, favorite player, it'd be like a tie between Michael Boley, who plays linebacker. Michael grew up a few miles from where I did in Alabama, so I like watching Boley play. And the other player that I like is a guy that people kind of overlook, and that's Big Deal, David Deal, the left tackle. I think he's a good guy. I think he works hard. I think he doesn't get enough credit for what he does, and I enjoy watching him play.
That's wonderful. You were with the Giants when we won Super Bowl back in 1990. I think that's when
Yep.
Whitney Houston performed
Yeah.
at the Super Bowl. What
Yeah.
was that like for you to be there and see her sing? And she was one of the greatest singers of the national anthem, even to this day.
It was a strange time in history because I grew up, you know, the late 60s, early 70s, going through, so I never really was involved with any kind of major conflict, military conflict for our country. That was the Persian Gulf War. Just as started, they were threatening to blow up the stadium, threatening to blow up, you know, mass terrorism moments. It was crazy. And for people and a nation of people who really didn't know about that or never really experienced that, that was big. So patriotism was on an all-time high. When Whitney Houston stands up and sings the national anthem, and she sings it the way she did, it sent chills up your spine. It was breathtaking to hear her sing. And the whole place on both sides, the guys were crying, fans were crying, broadcasters were stunned. It was overwhelming.
What was your reaction when you heard about her passing this week?
It was sad, you know. I really feel bad for her daughter, and her family. I feel bad that you know, in a life so young, 48 years old, it's bad. You know, as Mickey Mantle said, if I knew I was going to live it that long, I'd take better care of myself. But I guess in life it's tragic. She didn't get a chance to take care of herself, and she missed an opportunity. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, do everything to the fullest because you never know what your life is. I'm like, when you wake up tomorrow, you'll be 1 day older, 1 hour older, 1 second older. So you can spend it, you can try to buy it, but you can never get it back. Time is fleeting constantly.
Well, that's really great. Well, we're going to take a break right now, and we're going to come back in a few minutes. And I want to make sure all of our viewers stay there. You can run out and get a camera if you want, because we got Howard Cross in the house. It's a very exciting day for us here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, so we'll be right back, but stay tuned.